The downpour hadn't stopped for 3 days straight. Amara pressed her tired face against the bakery's foggy window, watching the relentless rain turn the streets into rushing streams of murky water. Her reflection gazed back at her, a ghost of a girl with exhausted brown eyes, flower-streaked dark skin, and black braids falling loose from their tie. She was barely 18, yet her body felt decades older, worn down by endless labor and sleepless nights. The sharp scent of caramelized sugar, mixed with the ever-present smell of rising dough, filled her lungs as she stood there, trying to catch her breath. Her hands throbbed with pain, the deep brown skin marred by fresh cuts from hours of work that had started before dawn. Mrs. Higgins had been particularly vicious today, her temper flaring with every imperfect loaf, every moment that didn't meet her impossible standards. "Amara." The woman's voice sliced through the quiet moment like a blade. "Table 7 is waiting. Get moving, girl." She grabbed the coffee pot, her fingers trembling from fatigue and hunger. The last meal she'd had was over a day ago, a luxury she couldn't afford when every dollar had to stretch to cover the cramped apartment she shared with her aunt. That tiny space where Aunt Tyra spent her days nursing bottles of cheap liquor, leaving Amara to shoulder the burden of rent, bills, and the ever-growing mountain of gambling debts. Table 7 sat tucked in the back corner, half hidden behind the ancient espresso machine that wheezed and sputtered like it might give up at any moment. Amara approached with her gaze lowered, the survival instinct she'd developed over years of making herself small, unnoticed, harmless. The cup slipped from her shaking hands before she even registered the customer sitting there. Porcelain shattered across the white marble tiles, dark coffee spreading like an accusation across the pristine floor. Her knees hit the ground instantly, heart racing, mind already calculating how much this mistake would cost her from her meager paycheck. I'm so sorry," she breathed, frantically gathering the broken pieces with her bare hands. A sharp edge bit into her palm, and she watched as crimson blood welled up, mixing with the spilled coffee on her dark skin. "Stop." The single word froze her completely. The voice was deep, commanding, carrying an authority that made every muscle in her body lock into place. She'd heard that tone before from men who didn't tolerate disobedience, who never had to ask anything twice. Her eyes lifted slowly. He sat with an unnatural stillness, a man who couldn't have been more than his mid-20s, yet his dark eyes held something ancient and dangerous. He was striking in a way that felt almost threatening, with sharp features and black hair styled perfectly back from a face that seemed carved from stone. His black suit was immaculate, tailored to perfection, the crisp white shirt beneath it emphasizing broad shoulders. Everything about him screamed wealth and power. He was beautiful the way a predator is beautiful. But his eyes held her captive. They weren't looking at her face. They were locked onto her bleeding hand with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. Two massive men stood behind him like sentinels, hands clasped in front of them in a way that suggested concealed weapons. The bakery had gone silent. Even Mrs. Higgins had stopped her constant complaints. "You're injured." He said it like she'd committed a crime. "It's nothing, sir. I'll clean this up and bring you another. Look at me." She obeyed without thinking. Something in his gaze pulled at her, something she couldn't name or understand. His jaw clenched, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He was angry, but not about the broken cup. The emotion radiating from him felt massive, complicated, far too intense for such a simple accident. "Jean," he said, never breaking eye contact with her. "First aid kit. Now." One of the men behind him moved immediately, vanishing through the front door into the rain. The other remained, a wall of muscle and menace. "Sir, really, I'm fine." "What's her name?" he asked, but not to her. His gaze had shifted to someone behind her. Amara's throat tightened. Something about this man made lying feel impossible, made truth feel mandatory. "Amara," Mrs. Higgins's voice came from somewhere nearby, thin and nervous. "Amara Vance." He repeated it slowly, deliberately, as though committing every syllable to memory. Amara Vance. Then his eyes released hers, traveling over her flower-covered apron, her worn-out sneakers, the bruise on her wrist from where she'd collided with the industrial mixer that morning. His expression darkened with each detail he noticed. "How old are you?" 18. The word barely escaped her lips. Something flickered across his features. Satisfaction mixed with what looked almost like relief. He leaned back in his chair, and she noticed his hands gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The man called Gene returned with a leather case that looked far too expensive to be an ordinary first aid kit. But Gene didn't open it. The man in the suit stood, unfolding to his full height, and suddenly the bakery felt suffocating. He was tall, powerfully built, radiating a presence that made her want to run toward him and away from him in equal measure. He stepped over the broken cup as if it didn't exist and reached for her hand. "Let me help you." It wasn't a question or a request. His fingers wrapped around her wrist, gentle yet absolutely firm, and the contact sent electricity shooting up her arm. His hands were warm, slightly calloused, completely steady as he turned her palm upward to examine the cut against her brown skin. She'd never been this close to someone like him. He smelled expensive, like sandalwood and something darker, something mysterious like smoke and hidden things. "This needs stitches." His voice had gone cold, clinical. "I can't afford a hospital." He snapped his fingers and the second man stepped forward. "Call Dr. Park. Tell him to come to the estate immediately." "The estate?" Her voice cracked. "No, sir, I have to work." "Mrs. Higgins will." "Mrs. Higgins." He finally looked away from her, his gaze landing on her employer who had emerged from the kitchen. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. "This girl is injured on your premises. Explain to me why she was working with equipment while clearly exhausted and malnourished." Mrs. Higgins's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Mr. Kong, I didn't realize." Kong. The name hit Amara like a physical blow. Everyone in the city knew that name. He was the head of the Korean Syndicate, the organization that controlled K-Town and half the city's underground operations. They owned politicians, police officers, entire neighborhoods. They were the kind of power that made governments nervous. And she'd just bled on the most dangerous man in the city. "How much does she owe you?" he asked Mrs. Higgins, still holding Amara's hand like it was something precious. "Nothing, sir." "She owes nothing. In fact, her pay is." "I'm not asking about her pay. I'm asking about her debt." Her aunt's debt. The world seemed to tilt sideways. How could he possibly know about Aunt Tyra's gambling debts? About the loan sharks who appeared monthly, taking whatever they could find? Mrs. Higgins's eyes darted to Amara, then back to him. "I don't know what you..." "Gene." He didn't raise his voice, but the man behind him pulled out a phone and began typing with disturbing efficiency. "Find out exactly what the Vance family owes and to whom. I want names and amounts within the hour." "No." The word burst from Amara before she could stop it. "Please, you don't understand. Those men, if you interfere." He looked back at her and the intensity in his gaze nearly knocked her backward. "Those men work for me, Amara. Everything in this city works for me." The first aid kit lay forgotten on the table. He was still holding her hand, his thumb now brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that seemed almost unconscious. "Possessive." "I don't understand," she managed to say. "You will." He pulled a pristine white handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it around her bleeding palm with surprising gentleness. "You're coming with me." "I can't. My shift isn't over." He turned to Mrs. Higgins. "She no longer works here. You'll prepare her final check with 2 months severance and have it ready within the hour, or I'll have the health department shut you down by lunch. Am I clear?" Mrs. Higgins nodded frantically. Panic clawed at Amara's chest. She needed this job. She needed the money, the routine, the invisibility it provided. "Please, Mr. Kong, I need to work." If you're trying to help, I appreciate it, but I'm not trying to help. His hand slid from her wrist to her elbow, steadying her as she tried to stand. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You're going to come with me to get that hand properly treated. Then we're going to discuss the terms of your new employment. Employment. Did you think I would let you go back to this? He gestured around the dingy bakery with something close to disgust. Working yourself to exhaustion for pennies, bleeding and apologizing for existing? The other customers were staring now, whispering behind their hands. One of them had their phone out, probably already spreading the news that Kong Minjun had walked into a neighborhood bakery and left with a girl. I don't even know you, she whispered. Something like pain flashed across his face, so quick she almost missed it. No, he said softly. You don't. But I know you, Amara. I've always known you. Before she could process that strange statement, he was guiding her toward the door, his hand still on her elbow. The two men fell into formation around them, one ahead, one behind. Protection or prison? She couldn't tell which. The rain hit her face as they stepped outside, but she barely felt it. A black SUV sat at the curb, sleek and threatening, windows tinted so dark they looked like pools of ink. The door was already open, revealing leather seats and an interior that smelled like luxury. Please, she tried one more time. I don't understand what's happening. He helped her into the vehicle with a hand on her lower back, the touch burning through her thin uniform. Then he slid in beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The door closed with a heavy sound that felt like finality. You don't need to understand yet. The SUV began to move, and she watched the bakery disappear behind sheets of rain. All you need to know is that you're safe now. You'll never have to worry about money again. Never have to apologize for taking up space. Never have to bleed alone in some filthy bakery. But why? Her voice broke. Why would you do this for a stranger? He turned to face her fully in the dim interior of the vehicle. His features looked almost inhuman in the shadows, too perfect, too intense, carved from obsession itself. His hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek, so gently it felt like a prayer. Because, he said, each word heavy with meaning she couldn't decipher, you were never a stranger to me, Amara. You were always mine. You just didn't know it yet. The city blurred past the windows, rain making everything look like a watercolor painting washing away. As Kong Minjun's thumb traced the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness, Amara realized that whatever had just begun in that bakery, whatever agreement she'd walked into without agreeing to anything, there would be no walking away from it. From him. The SUV turned onto a private road she'd never seen before, heading toward a part of the city where people like her didn't belong. And the Korean Mafia boss beside her watched her with eyes that held secrets, obsession, and something that looked dangerously close to devotion. She was terrified. But more terrifying was the small, desperate part of her that felt, for the first time in years, like maybe she was going home. The estate materialized from the rain like something from a dark fairy tale. Massive iron gates swung open automatically as they approached, revealing a long driveway lined with ancient trees that seemed to whisper secrets. The mansion itself was a sprawling monument to old money and ruthless power, 3 stories of stone and glass, a perfect blend of modern architecture and fortress-like security. Amara's breathing had gone shallow. The handkerchief around her hand was soaked through with blood now, a crimson stain against the white fabric. Minjun hadn't said another word during the drive, but his presence beside her felt alive, aware, watching. The SUV stopped beneath a covered entrance. Before she could reach for the door handle, Jean had it open, offering his hand. She took it carefully, her legs shaking as she stepped out into air that smelled like rain and expensive gardens. This way, Miss Vance. Jin's voice was surprisingly gentle for someone built like a tank. Minjun appeared at her other side, his hand finding the small of her back again. That possessive touch that made her skin burn even through her uniform. The doctor is already here, he said, guiding her up marble steps that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. The entrance hall stole what little breath she had left. Minimalist and grand, with polished floors that reflected crystal chandeliers overhead. Everything gleamed. This wasn't just wealth. This was a dynasty. Minjun. A woman's voice echoed from above, sharp with concern. Amara looked up to see an elegant figure descending the staircase. Her silver-streaked hair was swept into a perfect chignon, and she wore a silk dress that probably required a staff to maintain. Despite her age, she moved with grace that spoke of discipline and authority. Mother. Minjun's tone shifted, becoming almost careful. This isn't a good time. So I've heard. Her dark eyes, so like her son's, landed on Amara. She watched the woman's expression cycle through surprise, calculation, and something that looked almost like recognition. You brought a girl home. The girl, if the rumors from town are to be believed. Dr. Park is waiting in the study, Minjun said, his hand pressing more firmly against Amara's back, not moving her forward but holding her close, shielding her. Madame Kong descended the last few steps, her gaze never leaving Amara's face. She was beautiful in a severe way, intimidating. She's bleeding on my floor. Amara looked down in horror. Sure enough, drops of blood had fallen from her wrapped hand, creating a trail of crimson across the pristine marble. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean. Stop apologizing. Minjun's voice cut through her panic. Mother, this is Amara Vance. Amara, my mother, Madame Kong. You'll become acquainted later. Right now she needs medical attention. Vance. Madame Kong repeated the name like she was filing it away. The daughter of. Later. Something dangerous edged Minjun's tone. His mother heard it too, because she stepped aside, though her eyes continued tracking Amara as they passed. The study was lined with dark wood and leather-bound books from floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in a massive fireplace. An elderly Korean man with wire-rimmed glasses and a doctor's bag stood waiting. Dr. Park, thank you for coming. Minjun finally released her, but only to guide her toward a leather chair positioned near the fire. Of course, Mr. Kong. The doctor approached with practiced confidence. Now, let's see what we have here. Minjun remained standing beside her chair, so close she could feel the fabric of his trousers brush against her shoulder. As Dr. Park unwrapped the blood-soaked handkerchief, she saw Minjun's jaw clench. It's not as bad as it looks, the doctor said after a moment, gently probing the wound. Amara winced, and Minjun's hand immediately came to rest on her shoulder. Heavy, warm, grounding. A few stitches should do it. The cut is clean. I'll need to numb the area first. She nodded, trying to focus on anything but the man standing over her. But her awareness kept returning to Minjun's hand on her shoulder, his thumb now moving in small circles against her collarbone. How long has she been working at that bakery? He asked Dr. Park, though he was still looking at her. Mr. Kong, I'm just here to treat the... Look at her. His voice had gone cold. Old burn scars on her forearms. Defensive wounds on her hands. She's underweight. Probably hasn't eaten properly in weeks. He catalogued her failures like evidence in a trial. When was the last time you had a full meal, Amara? The question caught her off guard. Yesterday. Lunch. Yesterday. He repeated it flatly. It's nearly 6 in the evening. You've worked since 4 in the morning on an empty stomach. Jean, Minjun said without turning, have the kitchen prepare a full meal. Traditional Korean juk, something warm and nutritious. Bring it to the East Wing guest suite. The East Wing. Dr. Park's hands paused for just a moment. That's quite close to the family quarters. I'm aware. Minjun's tone suggested the conversation was over. Mr. Kong, Amara tried again, her voice sounding small in the grand room. I appreciate the medical attention, truly, but I should go home. My aunt will be worried, and I have to find another job. Your aunt is currently passed out on her couch with 2 empty bottles. She won't notice you're gone. He said it without cruelty, just stated it as fact. And you won't need another job. You'll be working here. Here. She looked around the study. Doing what? Whatever I need you to do. He finally moved, circling around the chair to crouch in front of her, bringing his face level with hers. Up close, she could see the perfection of his skin, the intense depth of his dark eyes. You'll live here in the East Wing. You'll have your own suite, your own staff. Your aunt's debts will be cleared. You'll want for nothing. Her heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. That sounds like a prison. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Or salvation, depending on how you look at it. Dr. Park finished stitching and wrapped her hand in clean gauze. Minjun walked the doctor to the door, their voices dropping to a murmur. When he returned, he poured an amber liquid into 2 glasses. I don't drink, she said. It's brandy. It'll help with the shock. He pressed one into her good hand, then sat in the chair across from her. Drink, Amara. She took a small sip and the liquid burned down her throat. Why are you doing this? The question came out steadier than she felt. You don't know me. But I do. He set his glass down. I've known you since you were 14 years old, Amara. Since the day you moved into that apartment with your aunt. Ice flooded her veins. How do you? I was 21, already running parts of the syndicate, learning how to be the man everyone expected me to become. His eyes never left hers. I saw you at the market on 3rd Street. You were buying the cheapest brands, counting coins. You wore a jacket 3 sizes too big, and you kept apologizing to everyone, even when they bumped into you. The memory hit her like a wave. She remembered that day, remembered feeling invisible and small. You watched me buy groceries? I watched you survive. He reached across the space between them, his fingers finding her uninjured hand. I watched you for 4 years, Amara. Watched you work yourself sick. Watched you give everything to an aunt who gave nothing back. Watched you fade a little more each day. That's... She searched for the word. That's obsession. Yes, it is. He didn't deny it, didn't flinch. I'm not going to lie to you. I've been obsessed with you since the moment I saw you. But you're here now. 18. Finally legal. Finally mine to protect. The implications crashed over her. You waited for me to turn 18. I waited for you to be old enough that no one could question my claim. He said it without shame, without hesitation. I've eliminated every man who looked at you wrong. Paid off debts you didn't know existed. The loan sharks who stopped coming last year? Mine. The landlord who didn't raise your rent when everyone else's went up? I own the building. She should have been screaming, running, calling for help. But the desperate, exhausted part of her wanted to sink into the life he was offering. This is crazy, she whispered. Yes. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. But you're not going to leave. You're just as tired of surviving as I am of watching you suffer. What happens now? Now. He stood, pulling her up with him. Now I show you to your room. You eat, you rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss the details of your new position here. And what position is that? He smiled, and it transformed his face from merely beautiful to absolutely devastating. My wife. The world tilted. What? You'll marry me, Amara. Willingly, I hope. He began leading her toward the door. But one way or another, you'll marry me. I've waited 4 years. I can wait a few more weeks for you to understand that this is where you belong. Her legs moved automatically, following him. Marriage to a Korean Mafia boss she'd met hours ago. A man who looked at her like she was oxygen. He led her to the 3rd floor, to a suite that made her entire apartment look like a storage closet. 4-poster bed with silk sheets, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens she couldn't see in the darkness. This is yours, he said. The clothes in the closet, I had them prepared in your size. The door locks from the inside. I won't enter without your permission. She turned to face him. And if I'm never ready? Something dark flickered across his expression. Then I'll wait. I'm a patient man, Amara. But make no mistake, you are mine. He started to leave, then paused at the door. Your dinner will arrive in 20 minutes. Get some rest. Minjun, she said, testing his name on her tongue. He went still. This is kidnapping. No. He turned back, his eyes pure possession. This is rescue. You just don't know it yet. 3 weeks passed in a blur. Amara stood in front of a full-length mirror in what was now her bedroom in the master suite. Minjun had insisted she move in after the engagement announcement. The dress was ivory silk, hand-embroidered with delicate patterns, fitted to her body like it had been made from her very skin. Her long black hair had been styled in cascading waves, adorned with small white flowers. She looked like a princess, or perhaps a queen of the underworld. The past 3 weeks had been surreal. There had been a confrontation with her aunt, a scene that ended with Minjun paying her off handsomely and severing Amara's ties to that toxic life forever. She had signed a marriage contract that guaranteed her millions if they divorced, though Minjun had made it abundantly clear that divorce wasn't an option he would ever consider. You look beautiful, Miss Vance, the head seamstress said, adjusting the train of the dress one last time. Amara changed back into casual clothes and went downstairs. Minjun was in his study, wearing his signature black suit and crisp white shirt. When he saw her, he immediately hung up the phone. Everything all right with the dress? He asked. Perfect. He walked around the desk and pulled a velvet box from a drawer. Inside lay a necklace of diamonds and sapphires that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. It was my grandmother's. She wore it on her wedding day. He fastened it around her neck. The weight of it felt like a collar, beautiful and binding. Amara, he said, his hands resting on her shoulders. I know this is fast, but I promise to spend every day trying to make you happy. And if you fail, then I'll try harder. That night at dinner, tension filled the air. Madame Kong picked at her food, clearly preoccupied. Minjun seemed distracted, his phone buzzing repeatedly. There's been a complication, he finally said. The Rossi syndicate is making noise about territory disputes. I need to handle something tonight. What kind of complication? Madame Kong asked sharply. Nothing I can't handle. He looked at Amara. I'll be back by morning. He left with a convoy of black SUVs. She watched from the window, the necklace still cold against her throat. She went to sleep afraid, not of him, but for him. A crash woke her at 3 a.m. She ran to the landing, her heart pounding. In the entrance hall below, Minjun stood in the center, his white shirt soaked with blood. Jean and another man flanked him. On the pristine marble floor lay a man, unconscious and badly beaten. Minjun. She ran down the stairs. Are you hurt? Not my blood, he said, his voice flat, emotionless. He looked at the man on the floor, then back at her. His eyes were empty, the eyes of the Mafia boss everyone feared, the killer she'd heard whispers about. The Rossis sent him to spy, he said quietly. He was taking photos of the house. Of your window. Ice flooded her veins. He won't be taking any more photos. Minjun's arm came around her, pulling her against his bloody shirt. I'm a monster, Amara. I do terrible things to protect what's mine. This is who I really am. This is what you're marrying. She looked up at him, really looked. I know who you are. I've always known. And she realized it was true. Somewhere between the bakery and now, between the obsession and the devotion, she'd stopped seeing the cage and started seeing the man. Go upstairs, he said softly. I'll come to you when this is handled. When he came to the bedroom an hour later, he was showered, his hair still damp. He pulled her against his chest without a word. I would burn this city down before I let anyone hurt you, he whispered into her hair. Does that terrify you? Yes, she admitted. But it also makes me feel safer than I've ever felt. Say you'll marry me, he said, pulling back to look at her. Not because of the contract. Because you want this. Because you want me. She looked at him, really looked. At the man who had watched over her for years, who had waited, who had obsessed. The man who would kill to keep her safe. I'll marry you because I want to. The wedding took place 2 days later. 300 guests filled the gardens of the estate. Amara walked down the aisle alone, by choice. Minjun waited at the altar looking devastating in his tuxedo, his eyes locked on her from the moment she appeared. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." They exchanged vows written by someone else, words about love and commitment that barely scratched the surface of what they actually were to each other. The priest said, "You may kiss the bride." Minjun kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like she was salvation and he was damned. "Mine," he breathed against her lips. "Finally, completely mine." "Yours," she agreed, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "Always yours." 6 months later, Amara sat in her personal library, winter sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was Amara Kong now, wife to the head of the Korean Mafia, queen of a criminal empire she was still learning to navigate. The door opened and Minjun entered, still wearing his black suit from whatever business had occupied his morning. He crossed the room to kiss her, a gesture that had become ritual. "Hello, wife." "Hello, husband." He sat beside her on the plush sofa. "Are you happy?" "You ask me that every week. And I'll keep asking until I believe your answer every time." She cupped his face in her hands. "I'm happy. I'm loved. I'm home." He rested his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve you. Good thing I don't care about what you deserve." Outside, snow began to fall, covering the gardens in white. Inside, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fireplace burning across the room. She had been drowning in that bakery, invisible and dying by inches. Minjun had pulled her from the depths, given her air, given her a love so consuming it bordered on madness. He had caged her, yes, but sometimes the cage was really salvation wearing a different face. She was home. If you enjoyed this dark romance story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more captivating tales of obsession, danger, and unexpected love. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think about Amara and Minjun's story. Should I write a sequel? What would you want to see happen next? Your support means everything, so share this with anyone who loves intense romance with a dangerous edge. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.